A young mother is found murdered near her Indiana home. Investigators have only one piece of evidence to help them find her killer. When a female body is discovered along the banks of an Alabama river, detectives must rely on a few tiny shreds of evidence to make their case. In New York, a woman is found dead at the bottom of a flight of stairs. Police must determine if her death is a suicide or murder. When there are no eyewitnesses to a murder, investigators look to the physical evidence to make their case. Forensic examiners seek out that one clue that can break a case wide open, a clue known as the silent witness. Named for the river flowing through its center, Elkhart, Indiana epitomizes the ideal of small-town America. It's a quiet, close-knit community, a place unfamiliar with the problems of violent crime. On March 3, 1992, a concerned father entered the Elkhart Police Department to file a missing persons report.
My daughter, her name is
Ruben Hernandez hadn't heard from his daughter in nearly 15 hours. 25-year-old Sandra Hernandez had dropped off her 3-year-old son around 5 p.m. the previous evening. Ruben believed that Sandra had a date that night. After saying her goodbyes, Sandra promised she would be back in a couple of hours to pick him up.
Okay.
Ruben and his wife were always happy to spend time with their only grandson, and they were glad to see that Sandra was starting to enjoy her life again. She had recently ended a turbulent 4-year relationship with her child's possessive father. Ruben explained that when he went to check on Sandra at her apartment, he got no response, though her car was still parked out front.
One particular guy that's been giving her a hard time.
Mr. Hernandez's concerns prompted Elkhart Police Lieutenant Tom Cutler to forego the 24-hour waiting period required before opening a missing persons investigation.
He's a fellow who was very concerned about not only his grandchild who he was taking care of, but also his missing daughter, and he knew that she wouldn't take off and leave the child without touching base with him.
After distributing Sandra's description to area law enforcement agencies, police quickly contacted her ex-boyfriend.
Did you guys argue?
Sean Parks strongly denied any knowledge of Sandra's disappearance.
Stuff about the kid, you know.
Why did you bring up something really like when I worked?
But he admitted that his 4-year relationship with her had been rocky.
You didn't appreciate it.
He said that recently, he and Sandra had been arguing frequently, and sometimes violently. Mostly, they fought over custody of their son. Sandra vowed she would never give up her child.
What did you guys talk
But
about?
despite the tensions, Parks insisted he would never hurt Sandra or their son.
Confrontation with Sandra. What were you doing Sunday night?
On the night Sandra disappeared, he claimed he was at work.
Friends.
Okay, with some friends. Okay.
Though Parks was cooperative, investigators know from experience that custody battles can sometimes end in murder.
Good job.
We checked with work, and he was there all night and didn't leave the premise. So we had no reason to believe that he had interacted with Sandra Hernandez on that night.
With the only obvious suspect eliminated, investigators had to consider that Sandra might have left town on her own volition. And though that seemed unlikely, they had to be certain. They went to her residence to search for answers. What they found only supported their suspicions that the young mother had met with foul play. None of Sandra's clothes seemed to be missing, and her luggage was still neatly stored in her closet.
Hey, Jim.
In the kitchen, detectives found a container filled with $230 in cash.
Driver's license.
Sandra's driver's license was also in the tin, with several other personal papers. Police saw no evidence to suggest that she had simply packed up and left town.
I don't think she was going anywhere.
Her neighbors later stated that they had not seen or heard Sandra at her apartment since she left to drop off her son the night she disappeared. With each passing hour, investigators realized that the chances of finding Sandra unharmed grew slimmer. They needed to determine if Sandra had in fact been on a date the night she disappeared, and if so, with whom. Sandra's friend, who worked with her at a door manufacturing company, came in to answer questions.
Okay, police department.
Closest friends, and they're
She hadn't noticed anything unusual about Sandra's demeanor in recent days.
How long has he been with the company? Okay,
In fact, the night she disappeared, Sandra was excited about a date she was going on with a coworker.
pushing the issue for quite a while. So
The man, Ricky Joyner, was a delivery driver at the company
right.
and had been friends with Sandra for some time. When contacted by police, Joyner volunteered to come answer questions. Investigators immediately noticed fresh scratches on his face and hands. Joyner claimed a door falling on him at work caused the injuries. He admitted that he had been out with Sandra the night she disappeared, but only as friends. He said he picked her up at 6 p.m. They had dinner and then went to a movie that lasted about 2 hours.
Are you ready to drive? Do I lie?
He dropped her off around 9:30.
Serious?
Sandra was in a hurry to pick up her son.
I'm serious.
He watched her get into her car and leave.
I'm serious. Call me when you get home. Make sure you get home.
He hadn't seen or heard from Sandra since.
Thank you.
All right.
Investigators asked Joyner to fill out a scientific content analysis form, referred to as a SCAN questionnaire. Like a polygraph, the questionnaire allows investigators to analyze a person's written responses for signs of deception or inconsistencies.
The SCAN questionnaire is a written form that we give people that ask people pointed questions and ask them to respond in their own writing. So it gives us a way to do an informal interview that sometimes reveals a lot about the information that the person's given.
Investigators analyzed Joyner's statements. Using the information to reconstruct Sandra's movements prior to her disappearance, Lieutenant Cutler quickly found a troubling inconsistency.
Part of his statement was that he had let her off at the apartment and she'd gotten into her car and left. Well, her car was still there, and the neighbors said no, nobody came there that night. So that leads us to believe that that part of the story was not true.
Though police had no motive and no direct evidence that a crime had been committed, they obtained a warrant to search Joyner's residence. But the search turned up nothing.
Okay.
Investigators knew they needed to look past the obvious. They collected ordinary household items, including a trash bag from Joyner's kitchen dotted with stains that appeared to be blood. Tests later showed, however, that the substance was not of human origin. Having found no hard evidence linking Joyner to Sandra's disappearance, the investigation threatened to go cold.
Canvases of where she lived. Well, certainly they're looking grim. Unfortunately, we still don't know how to assess them. We suspect that some foul plays happened. We've seen cases where people take off and vanish for reasons that nobody knows about, and they come back. We were certainly concerned that this was not a good situation and that we were going to find her dead.
On April 15, 1992, a month and a half after Sandra Hernandez was reported missing, their worst fears were confirmed. A farmer in nearby LaGrange County, Indiana, made a gruesome discovery: the body of a young woman.
1023 at the location.
Okay, Claire, we're just a couple minutes away.
As investigators in Elkhart, Indiana, continued searching for 25-year-old Sandra Hernandez, they received a call from police in nearby LaGrange County. A body matching Sandra's description had been found in an isolated field. A black trash bag covering the victim's head was removed and preserved as evidence. Using photographs, investigators confirmed that Sandra Hernandez had finally been found. Police began scouring the scene for any useful evidence. But nothing that could help them identify a suspect was found. After an exhaustive search of the area, it appeared that Sandra's killer had been careful not to leave any trace of evidence behind. At autopsy, the medical examiner determined that Sandra had died of asphyxiation resulting from manual strangulation. An analysis of the victim's stomach contents indicated that she had been murdered within an hour after eating. The medical examiner's analysis made Ricky Joyner's alibi impossible. Sandra could not have gone to a 2-hour movie after eating dinner with Joyner, as he had previously claimed.
Has anybody been in their house yet?
But to prove murder, investigators knew they needed more than a few inconsistencies in Joyner's story. They had to come up with hard evidence to tie Joyner to the crime scene. But all they had was the trash bag recovered from Joyner's apartment.
The trash bag turns out to have the most significance of anything that's taken. The trash bag that's found on the corpse, when the state police tech decide to look at the evidence, send it to the lab, they talk to our techs, and they decide, hey, we've got this bag from Joyner, the suspect's apartment. Let's send it to the lab with the bag we found on the corpse, just to have them look at it.
The bags were sent to forensic examiner John Vanderkolk at the Indiana State Police Crime Lab. Though it seemed like a long shot, Vanderkolk was asked to determine if the bag recovered from the victim and the bag seized from Joyner's apartment could have come from the same piece of plastic. To begin his analysis, Vanderkolk began by looking for repeatable class characteristics.
The repeatable class characteristics would be the cutting tool that would use to cut the bags apart, the size and shape of the bag, the general color of the bag, the dimensions of the bag, and any feature of the bag that can be repeated by the manufacturing process.
By shining a light through the evidence, Vanderkolk determined that random color variations, microscopic impurities, and stretch marks were consistent between the bags. He continued his analysis by comparing the bags end to end. Vanderkolk found that the unique tool marks made as the bags were separated during manufacturing corresponded between the top of one of the bags and the bottom of the other. He was certain that the two bags had originated from the same piece of plastic, and in fact, they had come from the same roll.
I was convinced by the random pigment variation that carried over from one bag to the other, and also the random impurities and the stretch marks generated off the impurities that carried over from one bag to the other directly across the cut separation. The randomness definitely carried over throughout the circumference of the bottom of the bag from Sandra Hernandez's head and the top of the bag that Elkhart Police Department had recovered from Ricky Joyner's house.
With no way to explain how a trash bag from his apartment ended up around the victim's head, Ricky Joyner was arrested and charged with the murder of Sandra Hernandez. Police surmised that after going out to dinner together, Sandra went with Joyner to his residence. But something went wrong. After a violent struggle, Joyner strangled Sandra to death. Police theorized that before putting her body into his car, he covered Sandra's head with a trash bag to keep traces of blood from being left behind. He then drove his victim to nearby LaGrange County. He placed her in the isolated field and left her there. After extensive legal proceedings, a jury found Ricky Joyner guilty of the murder of Sandra Hernandez. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Ricky Joyner believed that an ordinary trash bag would cover up his crime. Other killers will go to even greater lengths to conceal their guilt. Nestled in the Tennessee River Valley, the city of Decatur, Alabama clings to a rich and colorful past. Its laid-back southern charm and its reputation as a fishing haven attract thousands of sportsmen each year. But in 1988, the river attracted a different kind of visitor. On July 5th, a fisherman called Decatur police after stumbling upon a body dressed in a nightgown and a blue pajama top near the shoreline. Police could determine that the body was female, but little else. The victim had been decapitated. After securing the area, investigators began the task of processing the scene for clues that could tell them who this victim was. They knew that because she had been decapitated, her identity would be the key to exposing this killer. The crime scene had little to offer. Blood-spattered rocks on the path and drag marks in the overgrowth led detectives to conclude that the victim had been killed elsewhere and then brought to the river. There were no signs of tire tracks or anything else that could help police identify the killer. With only the victim's fingerprints to work with, Sergeant John Boyd of the Decatur Police Department began trying to put a name to the Jane Doe.
And from those fingerprints, we tried a number of agencies to see if we could make an identification. We tried through here, we tried through Huntsville, and we couldn't get anything.
To expand the search, the prints were cataloged and then forwarded to the FBI, whose national fingerprint database might yield better results. In the meantime, investigators hoped an autopsy could tell them more about how this victim died. Determining the exact cause of death would be difficult. But the medical examiner did find a few faint ligature marks below where the head had been severed, indicating that the victim had been strangled before being decapitated with a dull cutting tool. The pajama top and nightgown worn by the victim were collected and forwarded to the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. There, trace evidence examiner John Kilborn began processing the clothes for any potential clues.
We use a method that we call taping, where we take cellophane tape and using the sticky or adhesive surface of the tape, we press it down on the clothing, and what this does is collect any particles, hairs, fibers, or other particles from the surface of that clothing.
Kilborn found a substantial number of hairs and assorted red and black synthetic fibers that had clung to the victim's clothing. Having more than 20 years' experience analyzing similar evidence from crime scenes, Kilborn believed he knew their origin.
Some of the fibers were unusual in that the fibers had adhesive on them, some type of glue on the surface. I have had other cases similar that had fibers similar to this, and in each of these cases it turned out to be adhesive from a felt car mat in the trunk mat. And I felt like in looking at these fibers, we're looking at possibly this victim having been in the trunk of a car.
But until examiners had a source of comparison, the value of these items on their own would remain limited. 3 days later, police believed they got their first break. Fishermen had reported finding a human head floating near the shoreline. The area was less than a mile from where Jane Doe's body had been discovered.
It had been decaying, obviously, at least 3 days. It was an overwhelming stench. The head was in a severe state of decomposition. We had extreme difficulty in even picking it up to get it inside the boat. We finally had to get enough plastic bags and bag it up and put it on ice, and put it in a styrofoam cooler and put it on ice and carried it down to the forensic lab.
But prolonged exposure to the elements made it impossible for examiners to find any identifiable features. Frustrated by the lack of progress, police realized that until they could find a way to identify the decapitated woman, this case would likely remain unsolved. Police in Decatur, Alabama were making little progress in identifying a headless female victim pulled from the banks of the Tennessee River. Over the next 10 days, investigators scoured through dozens of missing persons reports in an effort to learn the victim's identity. But none matched the description of their Jane Doe. The case threatened to go unsolved. But on July 15th, they got a break. Searching through military files, the FBI found a fingerprint match with the victim. Jane Doe was identified as 32-year-old Sandra Gale Leslie, formerly enlisted in the United States Air Force. Records indicated that she currently lived in Nashville, Tennessee, 120 miles away from where she was found. Police jumped on the lead.
On that same day, after we learned who she was, we contacted Nashville Metro authorities and found out that they did in fact have a missing person report on Mrs. Leslie.
Police learned that Sandra Leslie had been reported missing by her husband 2 days after her body was discovered in Alabama. Decatur police traveled to Tennessee and teamed up with Nashville authorities. Their first visit was to Sandra Leslie's husband. 39-year-old Billy Leslie told police that his marriage to Sandra had been shaky. But he loved his wife of almost 10 years and said they were trying to work out their problems.
knew things were happening.
A few days before her disappearance, the couple dropped off their 2 kids with relatives in an effort to spend more time alone together. But on the afternoon of July 4th, Billy returned home from running errands to find that Sandra and her clothes were gone.
Hello? Hey, how you doing?
He said that in the weeks before her disappearance, Sandra had received numerous unexplained phone calls.
Bye-bye.
Afterward, she would often leave the house with no explanation, leaving Billy to take care of the kids. He was convinced she was having an affair, though he didn't know with whom. As a matter of routine, police asked if they could look around. Billy gave his consent. To their surprise, investigators immediately found inconsistencies with his statements.
Mark. All right.
Sergeant Robert Moore of the Nashville Police Department took part in the search.
He said she took her clothes with her. The closet was so full of clothes you couldn't put another blouse in it. There was no room for anything else. Dresser drawers, her clothes are gone, but yet every drawer was full. I mean, it just didn't look like somebody had moved out.
Though Billy couldn't explain the discrepancy, he insisted that he would never hurt his wife, and he certainly had nothing to do with her murder. He agreed to let forensic technicians process his living room. Luminol was applied to the floor. But investigators found no traces of blood or any other signs of violence. But there were indications that the residence had been thoroughly cleaned recently.
Maybe bring the house light
Despite
on.
the lack of evidence, investigators suspected that Billy Leslie was hiding something. Police began interviewing friends and neighbors. One neighbor claimed that Billy and Sandra fought often. Just a few days before Sandra disappeared, she heard what she described as a knockdown, drag-out fight coming from outside her window. When she looked outside, she saw Billy screaming at Sandra. As the fight escalated, Billy became physically abusive toward his wife. The neighbor didn't recall seeing Sandra after that night. She just assumed Sandra had finally decided to leave Billy. Perhaps that's exactly what Billy Leslie wanted everyone to believe.
Come here, just have a
One of
seat
Sandra's
here, if you will,
friends told police that Sandra had recently filed for divorce, and as a result, Billy had become increasingly violent toward her.
I think, first of all,
So much so that just before her death, Sandra decided to change the beneficiary of her life insurance policy.
We're working with the people in Decatur, Alabama. Billy?
Prior to the change, Billy Leslie stood to gain $150,000 from Sandra's death.
She had feared for her life, and she changed the beneficiary of that insurance policy to her brother in California, and specifically asked him to make sure her children were taken care of should anything happen to her.
In the same area.
Billy wasn't informed that he was no longer the beneficiary. For investigators, a possible motive for murder was beginning to emerge. Billy Leslie, as far as he knew, had a lot to gain from his wife's death. But so far, their case was only circumstantial. Later that evening, police obtained a warrant to search Billy's car, possibly used to transport Sandra's body to Alabama. Luminol was applied to the trunk. Investigators found an overwhelming amount of substance that appeared to be blood. Billy Leslie explained he had gone fishing recently and put his catch into the trunk. The trunk mat was collected and sent back to the Decatur Crime Lab for a more thorough forensic examination. While waiting for the test results, investigators continued to build their case. Hoping to find witnesses that could put Billy near the crime scene, police released details of the murder to the media in Alabama. A few days later, the tactic paid off. A Decatur resident remembered having a conversation with a man at a convenience store a few hours before Sandra's body was discovered. He had asked where to find a good fishing spot. The woman directed him to an area half a mile away. It was the same location where the victim was found.
What time of day?
She was shown a photo lineup.
Well, I was in the convenience store at 3 in the morning on Saturday.
She had no idea who the suspect on the photo lineup was, but she was able to immediately point to Billy Leslie and say, "This is the guy. This is the guy that was here," and asked me about a place to fish.
The witness testimony put Billy Leslie just a half a mile away from the crime scene on the day of the murder, and investigators had no doubt that he was responsible for his wife's death. Now, they hoped the crime lab would provide irrefutable proof. Authorities were closing in on Billy Leslie, the man they believed responsible for the decapitation of his wife, Sandra. Though their case was largely circumstantial, they hoped a trunk mat collected from the suspect's car could physically link him to the homicide. After serological tests determined that the blood found on the trunk mat was not fish blood, as Billy Leslie claimed, Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences trace analyst John Kilbourne began analyzing dozens of hairs and fibers recovered from the mat. Using a comparison microscope, he began looking for common characteristics between samples from the trunk mat and those recovered from the clothes Sandra Leslie had been wearing. The color, texture, and cross-sectional shape of the fibers matched.
We found a number of fibers from the victim's clothing that were consistent to the some of the known fibers from the trunk mat, as well as some foreign fibers that were in the trunk mat. So we were able to show a link between the fibers and the hairs out of the vehicle to the victim herself.
Sandra Leslie's body had been in the trunk of that car. And the only other person known to have driven the vehicle was her husband, Billy. Billy Leslie was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife, Sandra. Police theorized that Billy Leslie believed he had much to gain from killing his wife before their divorce was finalized. On July 4th, 1988, after a heated argument, Billy made the decision to kill his wife. After strangling Sandra, he loaded her into the trunk of their car and set out to dispose of the body on the banks of the Tennessee River in Decatur, Alabama. Not realizing that her fingerprints were on file with the military, Billy believed that separating the head from the body would make identification impossible. In December of 1989, Billy Wayne Leslie was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Even in death, Sandra Leslie managed to leave behind clues that pointed to her killer's identity. But in some cases, investigators have no idea where the evidence will lead them. The quiet, middle-class neighborhood of Lake Grove, New York, is a haven of suburban life. The community's illusion of serenity, however, was unable to provide protection from tragedy. On April 7, 1994, police and paramedics were dispatched to the home of 47-year-old Stuart Kovacs. Kovacs said that Irene, his wife of more than 20 years, was inside, dead. He believed she had killed herself by jumping off the second-floor balcony. Not wanting to contaminate the scene, the officer allowed only one paramedic into the house. Inside, 45-year-old Irene Kovacs' lifeless body was lying on the floor, covered with a towel. Her hair was wet, indicating she had recently showered. The paramedic noted bruising on the victim and a cut lip. An empty container of gasoline additive lay nearby. A large quantity of the substance was found pooled in the victim's mouth. It appeared that Irene Kovacs had poisoned herself and then jumped or fell from the second-floor balcony. Stuart Kovacs said that while working in the garage, he cut himself on a power tool. Going inside to get a Band-Aid, he discovered his wife on the floor. Panicked, he called 911 and then went upstairs to the bedroom to get a towel to cover her and to clean up his wound. On the couple's bed, he discovered a suicide note tucked underneath the family Bible. As a matter of routine protocol, homicide investigators were dispatched to the scene. Armed with a video camera, the team made their way into the residence. Almost immediately, they were struck by the victim's appearance. Lieutenant John Girash of the Suffolk County Police Department explains.
It's somewhat unusual that a woman would want herself to be discovered not dressed. In and of itself, that is not proof of anything other than suicide, but it is one of the circumstances that we take into account as we investigate.
After removing the body, police continued examining the scene. On the second-floor landing, they found a piece of recently dented sheetrock on the wall about ankle height, as though it had recently been kicked in anger, or perhaps a struggle. Unsure of its significance, the area, along with the rest of the scene, was thoroughly photographed. A short while later, after learning of his mother's death, the Kovacs' 19-year-old son came in to speak with detectives. He said that the situation at home had grown tense in recent months.
It was just, he had probable cause to think so. He found it.
His parents' divorce was due to be finalized soon, and his dad had become increasingly abusive, often exploding into a rage over nothing. In one recent incident, Stuart Kovacs returned home early from work and confronted Irene with a note he had found that had been sent to her by a business associate. Though Irene denied any wrongdoing, Stuart accused her of having an affair and began threatening her with violence. Suffolk County Homicide Detective Robert Doyle.
The Kovacs children indicated to us that there was a very, very poor relationship at home, that apparently Irene Kovacs was in tremendous fear of Stu Kovacs. He abused her mentally, probably more so than physically. It was a real hellish situation to be children in that particular home.
The son added that on the night before his mother's death, she had seemed normal and happy, not at all depressed or suicidal. For investigators, the routine suicide investigation had raised more questions than answers. Irene Kovacs just didn't seem a likely candidate for suicide. Now, police realized that the circumstances surrounding this tragedy demanded a closer look. Though it appeared that 45-year-old Irene Kovacs had poisoned herself and then jumped off the second-floor balcony of her home, police in Lake Grove, New York were not convinced. A few hours after her body was discovered, police returned to the residence with a warrant. Now they were searching for evidence that Irene's husband, Stuart Kovacs, had murdered her. Forensic examiner Robert Jenna was asked to assist in the search.
The fact that we have somebody claiming that this is a suicide, the husband, and the pieces of the puzzle just don't seem to fit a suicide, you now have to focus strongly on the physical evidence to try to either show that it was in fact a suicide or show that it was in fact something other than a suicide.
To disprove the suicide story, police searched for evidence of a violent struggle. And though Kovacs blamed a deep cut to his finger on a power tool accident, police speculated it could also be explained by a blow to a sharp object, like a tooth. But traces of Stuart Kovacs' blood were found exactly where he insisted the accident took place. The search continued inside the home. In the couple's second-floor bathroom, police found traces of blood on the commode lid. A washcloth found in the sink also appeared to be blood-stained. Kovacs said the blood had come from his injured finger. Investigators collected the evidence. In the bedroom, an officer recovered the suicide note found earlier by Stuart Kovacs. Even though the writing was identified as Irene's, a close inspection of the language caught investigators' attention.
What he purported to be a suicide note was in fact some writings of Irene Kovacs that really had nothing to do with suicide at all. She was talking about her life, she was talking about various things that she was going through personally in her life. At no point did that particular note indicate or suggest that she was going to commit suicide.
Unsure what to make of the evidence, police hoped Irene herself could give them answers. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to Irene's head and chest. But he could not rule out that the injuries occurred as a result of the fall from the second floor. Blood and tissue samples were collected and forwarded to the Suffolk County Crime Lab. There, toxicologists began analyzing the samples for the presence of the alcohol methanol, the main compound used in gasoline additives like the one Irene allegedly swallowed. First, examiners analyzed Irene's blood samples by using a gas chromatograph, an apparatus that separates complex mixtures into individual compounds. The analysis of the blood confirmed that fatal amounts of methanol were present. Toxicologist Ed Briglia of the Suffolk County Crime Lab continued the analysis on the tissue samples.
Subsequent to that finding, we analyzed other specimens that we received, primarily gastric contents, intestinal contents, and esophageal contents. Those specimens revealed no methanol to be present, which was totally contrary to the notion that Mrs. Kovacs could have consumed methanol shortly before her death. The reason this is the case is that it takes a period of time, anywhere from a minimum of approximately 1 hour upwards to approximately 4 to 5 hours, for the alcohol to be removed from the stomach.
For methanol to be found in the blood but not in the tissues told examiners that the gas additive had been absorbed through Irene's skin, not ingested through her mouth. She never swallowed the gas additive. To make sense of the findings, police turned back to forensic examiner Robert Jenna. Using photographs and diagrams from the scene, Jenna found a clue. There were portions of Irene's body lying underneath the second-floor landing. It was unlikely that she came to rest in that position after falling over the railing. And Stuart Kovacs claimed he never touched Irene's body. And there was something else. One of the photographs revealed that the gas additive stains on the floor formed an outline of Irene's body.
In order to get this type of pattern, the victim would have to have been lying down in this position when the material was deposited on her, as opposed to her falling from the top landing, already having the material in her system. So it was consistent with her being in this position, lying on her back, the liquid deposited on her face and body, causing this outline that led us to believe that this particular case was not a suicide, but a homicide. The outline that was
coupled with the toxicologist's findings, the evidence showed that the gas additive had been poured into Irene's mouth while she was already dead or dying on the floor. To make their case, police still needed proof of a struggle. Examiners performed DNA tests on the various blood samples collected from the couple's bathroom, believed to have been left by Stuart's cut finger. But the analysis disproved Stuart Kovacs' story. All of the blood found in the bathroom had come from Irene. That proved that she had been bleeding prior to the fall from the balcony. For investigators, it was proof that Irene Kovacs had not taken her own life, but that Stuart Kovacs had taken it from her. With a warrant in hand, police quickly tracked down Stuart Kovacs as he returned home from work. He was taken into custody and booked for murder. Investigators believe that after beating Irene as she got out of the shower, Stuart Kovacs forced her over the balcony. After pouring the gas additive into her mouth to make her death look like a suicide, he smeared blood from a cut sustained during the assault on the power tool in the garage. On December 17, 1996, Stuart Kovacs was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Some killers will stop at nothing to conceal their crimes.
These are the...
When there are no human observers to a murder, investigators must look for a different kind of witness to reveal a killer's identity. They turn to the crime lab, where forensic examiners can uncover the truth by turning the smallest clue into a silent witness. In Virginia, a classified ad lures a crazed gunman to his victim's home. Police must try to unravel the killer's identity through a few spent bullet casings. An internet romance turns deadly, and Texas authorities have no way of identifying the suspect. they turned to computer experts to track a killer through cyberspace. In California, 2 women are murdered at a movie studio theme park on Mother's Day. Detectives must rely on the victims themselves to point them to the killer.
You got the wrong guy. Hey.
Often, victims of homicide are lured to their deaths by someone they know and perhaps even trust. But forensic examiners can expose the deception and reveal the killer who harbors deadly intentions. On the evening of September 24th, 1997, officers from the Newport News, Virginia Police Department were dispatched to the home of 35-year-old Harry Kaiser. One of the man's friends was worried about his safety and called 911. When the officer arrived a few minutes later, no one appeared to be home. But when he made his way around the side of the house, he spotted a man lying motionless on the floor, taped to a chair. Unsure if the attacker was still in the house, the officer cautiously made his way inside. After securing the scene, he went to the victim's aid. The man, identified as Harry Kaiser, was gagged and bound with electrical tape. Though he had been shot in the head, he still had a faint pulse.
2124, send me a medic to this location. I have 1 male with a gunshot wound to the head.
Paramedics rushed to the scene. Harry Kaiser was in grave condition. After removing the gag, the responding team went to work on the victim. Officers pried a .22 caliber pistol from Kaiser's grip. The gun appeared to be jammed. Kaiser was rushed to the hospital. Shortly after arriving there, however, he lapsed into a coma. Detectives and forensic technicians were summoned to the scene to begin their investigation. Inside the home, they found no signs of a forced entry. But there were clear signs of a violent struggle and indications that it had escalated into a gunfight. A small caliber bullet, consistent with having come from Kaiser's .22, was found lodged in the wall. Several spent 9mm shells were also recovered near where the victim was found. On the floor, examiners found and collected a hoop earring. And there was one other potential clue. The title to Kaiser's Porsche, which was still parked in the driveway, was found lying out. All of the items were collected and sent to the crime lab.
Noticed mostly was there was 2 taillights in
Detectives
the back,
began interviewing Kaiser's neighbors.
Saw someone, never seen before in the area.
Only one had useful information.
Got into a vehicle.
A few hours earlier, a man who lived across the street saw a tall, dark figure rush toward a vehicle parked in front of Kaiser's home and then quickly speed away. But the witness hadn't been wearing his glasses at the time and could offer no description of the man he saw. Detective Richard Gaddis was only able to uncover one clue.
This witness did note that the vehicle that this figure got into had a high third mounted tail light on the back of it. That's all he could see with his poor vision as it went down the street.
Your relationship
Hoping to find more useful information, investigators turned to the woman whose 911 call brought police to Kaiser's home the night before. She explained that Kaiser was selling his Porsche through a newspaper ad. He had told her that one prospective buyer, a tall, young African-American male, called him on his cell phone repeatedly and dropped by the house unannounced on a few occasions. The friend stated that shortly before the shooting, Kaiser called her and said the buyer had stopped by again. After a brief visit, the man left, saying he was going to the store and would return shortly. But Kaiser sensed that he was up to something. He armed himself with his .22 caliber pistol and asked his friend to call him back in half an hour.
No, I don't. No, this is like in the middle of the transaction.
When she did, there was no answer.
Now what about the...
Though detectives were certain that the car deal had somehow turned violent, they struggled to identify a suspect. Investigators hoped that an examination of the physical evidence could help them develop a profile of the man responsible for the assault. Technicians at the Newport News Police Crime Lab processed the victim's clothes for any stray hairs or fibers that may have been left behind. But other than the tape used to bind Harry Kaiser, examiners found nothing. Looking to generate a lead, detectives released details of the assault and the investigation to area law enforcement agencies. A short while later, they got a tip from police in nearby York County, Virginia. A few months before Harry Kaiser was attacked, a York County man selling a luxury automobile had a confrontation with a menacing car buyer.
I'm asking $28,000.
A tall, young African-American man accused the seller of not thinking he was good enough to own a fancy car.
Huh? I can afford this car, man.
The seller feared the man enough that he immediately reported the incident to police. The suspect reportedly drove a Geo Tracker, a vehicle with a high-mounted third taillight, like the one seen leaving Kaiser's home the night he was shot. Newport News police were convinced the same man was responsible for both incidents. Investigators knew they had to find a way to identify this violent suspect before he found another victim. Detectives obtained a warrant for Harry Kaiser's cell phone records and searched for unfamiliar numbers.
We sat down with the phone records and weeded out all the people known to Harry Kaiser, his family, his friends. There was one telephone number on that phone record that was unusual to him.
It was traced to a home in nearby Hampton, Virginia, and it had been placed at 6:45 on the evening of the shooting.
The number right here looks familiar to you.
The homeowner knew nothing of the call or of Harry Kaiser.
So you probably didn't call that by any property?
The lead appeared to be a dead end.
House, anything of that sort?
But then, the woman added that her 22-year-old son had recently been looking to purchase a new vehicle.
Just a car. Just a car. Just a car.
His name, she said, was James Gatling.
He usually comes home in there.
Gatling was contacted and brought in for questioning. Though he matched the descriptions given by Kaiser's friend and the man from York County, he hardly seemed like a person capable of violence.
Are you employed, sir?
Gatling admitted owning a Geo Tracker and was upfront about having visited both the man in York County and Harry Kaiser.
I don't know. He didn't mind admitting that he was, in fact, the person that had been to Harry Kaiser's house on several occasions looking at this Porsche, but he simply denied having anything to do with the shooting or being there when the shooting occurred.
You're right there. Now,
When asked about an injury to one of his earlobes, Gatling could offer no explanation. And though the injury was consistent with evidence recovered from the crime scene, police had no way to prove it. After several hours of questioning, they had no choice but to release James Gatling. 3 days after the shooting, Word came in that Harry Kaiser died from injuries sustained during the assault. James Gatling was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. And accounts of his unpredictable behavior led police to fear that he was capable of more deadly violence. Police in Newport News, Virginia, were closing in on a suspect in the shooting death of 35-year-old auto mechanic Harry Kaiser.
Okay.
Though James Gatling admitted being at the victim's house the night of the murder, investigators lacked physical evidence that could tie him directly to the crime. Looking for a way to connect Gatling to the murder, investigators forwarded the 9mm shell casings recovered from the crime scene to examiner John Ward at the Virginia State Bureau of Forensic Science in Norfolk.
We got involved in this case when I received a phone call from Detective Gaddis, who indicated that there had been a murder in his city, and they had some cartridge cases from the crime scene, and they'd had a suspect but no firearm. Was there anything we could do for him?
Using a comparison microscope, Ward confirmed that all of the 9mm casings were fired by the same weapon. After thoroughly photographing the evidence using a digital camera, Ward then entered the images into a national computer database called DrugFire. This database can tell examiners if bullets found at a crime scene were fired from a particular weapon that has been previously test-fired in connection with another crime. When a bullet is fired, imperfections in the gun barrel etch a pattern onto the shell cartridge. Examined microscopically, these scratches and swirls are as individual as a fingerprint. The DrugFire database looks for other shell casings on file that have similar markings. When Ward finds a potential match, he superimposes the images to see if they share the same unique signature. Ward found that the gun used to kill Harry Kaiser had been test-fired in connection with another crime less than a year before. Police now needed to find out who had owned the weapon at the time. Investigators requested the case file and learned that 22-year-old James Gatling had owned the gun. 9 months earlier, Gatling was suspected of firing the weapon into a restaurant. But ballistics tests back then showed that Gatling's gun had not fired the shot. Though he and his gun were cleared in the incident, a record of his weapon would remain a permanent entry in the DrugFire database.
Once a weapon is analyzed and connected to a person, that remains a digital image for forever. So in a way, you've always got that gun. Even if you don't have the actual gun itself, you've got all of its markings and you know who it belonged to, at least at one point.
For investigators, it was a huge break in the case. Not only did Gatling admit to knowing the victim, he was now linked to the murder weapon. On October 2nd, 1997, James Gatling was arrested for suspicion of murder.
Turn the vehicle off!
His vehicle was towed to the police impound lot for a closer examination.
Step out of the vehicle!
Police obtained a warrant to search Gatling's home, but the 9mm weapon was nowhere to be found. Without it, investigators still hadn't conclusively tied the suspect to the killing. Police searched Gatling's vehicle for anything that could help physically link him to Kaiser's murder. Though no weapon was found, police uncovered something they hoped would finally seal the case. A roll of black electrical tape similar to the tape that was used to bind Harry Kaiser to the chair. In the lab, technicians unrolled every piece of tape that had been collected from the crime scene and compared the broken or torn ends to the end of the black electrical tape found in Gatling's car. The tears from the two pieces of tape lined up perfectly. Now there could be no doubt. James Gatling was responsible for the death of Harry Kaiser.
Put your hands up! Hands up! All right? Hands up! Sit in the chair!
Police believe that shortly after Harry Kaiser talked with his friend on the phone, James Gatling returned to the house. Motivated by an unexplainable rage, Gatling overpowered his victim and bound him to a chair. After getting off one shot, Kaiser's gun jammed. Gatling then shot the 35-year-old mechanic and left the scene. James Gatling was convicted of the first-degree murder of Harry Kaiser and sentenced to life in prison.
Might have come into.
In the Gatling case, detectives tracked a killer who tried to hide behind the anonymity of classified ads. To catch a murderer in Texas, investigators would have to follow a mystery woman through an even more complex maze. In April 2000, 20 miles southwest of Austin in the hill country of central Texas, a rancher surveying his property noticed a blanket lying on the side of a trail. When he looked underneath, he discovered the remains of a decomposing human body. Deputies from the Hays County Sheriff's Office and officers from the Texas Rangers were quickly dispatched to the scene. After securing the area, the team began processing it for clues. But there was little physical evidence to be found. Recent rains had washed away any trace of the killer that might have been left behind. Other than the victim himself and the blanket used to cover him, nothing of any forensic value was found. Investigators speculated that he had been lying there for close to 2 weeks. And prolonged exposure to the Texas sun had left the body in a severe state of decomposition. According to Captain Sam Williams of the Hays County Sheriff's Office, identifying this victim would be a challenge.
Due to the advanced state of decomposition, there was no available fingerprints, and so we weren't going to be able to come up with anything there.
At autopsy, the medical examiner determined the victim had died as a result of a .22 caliber bullet to the head, most likely made by a high-powered rifle. But there was no way to determine how old the victim was or what he looked like in life. And with over 70,000 missing persons cases reported in Texas each year, investigators realized that searching through those reports for a match would be overwhelming.
I think it's the angle that it's taken.
The victim's teeth were carefully documented and photographed for future comparisons. To aid in the identification process, investigators called on the expertise of Dr. Dave Glassman, a professor of forensic anthropology at Southwest Texas State University. Measuring the width of the brow ridge and the dimensions of the eyes and nose, Dr. Glassman found this skull was consistent with a Caucasian male. To pinpoint his age, he examined the sutures, the areas where the bones of the skull connect to one another that close over time. One, called the basilar suture due to its location at the base of the skull, closes in most individuals between the ages of 19 and 24 years of age.
The determination that I made was the basilar suture had closed, suggesting that the individual was older than about 19 or 20, but the internal sutures were just in their very initial stages of closure, indicating that the individual would have been between about 19, 20, and 30 years of age.
With Dr. Glassman's analysis, detectives could narrow their search of missing persons to young white males. And though several files matched those criteria, only one had been reported a few weeks before this victim was discovered. A records check indicated that 20-year-old Carrie Cuyava, a sophomore from Texas A&M University, had been reported missing to campus police 2 weeks earlier by his parents and his roommate at the university.
Further than that.
Having only the victim's teeth to help them make an identification, detectives quickly contacted Cuyava's family dentists.
Over the phone, their dentist literally described verbatim every tooth in the mouth to an exact match, which in forensic world is almost as good as a fingerprint or as good as a fingerprint.
The search for a missing university student had met head-on with a murder investigation. But with no solid evidence pointing to a suspect, investigators were still a long way from putting this case to rest.
Okay.
Authorities in Texas had identified human remains found on a secluded ranch as belonging to missing 20-year-old Texas A&M sophomore Carrie Cuyava. Looking to identify a suspect, investigators questioned Cuyava's roommate at the university who had reported him missing. He told detectives that just before the disappearance, Cuyava had made plans to visit a San Antonio woman whom he'd befriended 3 months earlier in an internet chat room.
Oh, she's gorgeous, man. You want to take a look at her picture real quick?
Though they had never spoken directly, Cuyava seemed enamored by photographs sent by the young woman, whose name was Kelly McCauley.
She's good looking, man.
Detective Will Scott of the University Police Department learned details of the chat room romance.
The day that Carrie left Texas A&M was the day that he was supposed to meet Kelly for the very first time in person in San Antonio. The reason being that they had not spoken before, according to the roommates and friends. Carrie had told them that Kelly had her jaw broken by an ex-boyfriend. Consequently, the jaw was wired shut and she wasn't able to speak on the phone. However, she was able to communicate over that 3-month period by computer.
Studious, so it's kind of unlike him.
The roommate said Carrie left in his car for San Antonio and was supposed to return by the end of the weekend, but he never showed. However, over the course of the following days, he received emails from Cuyava saying that he was having a great time with Kelly and was going to stay a little while longer. Investigators needed to question Kelly McCauley, possibly the last person to have seen Carrie Cuyava alive. But the young blonde woman's whereabouts turned out to be a mystery in itself.
If we could match that, not that I'm aware of.
Investigators could find no record of her in San Antonio or anywhere else in the state.
The telephone companies
And tracking her down through her chat room login name proved more difficult than detectives anticipated.
With simple email, that's pretty easy to trace. But when you enter the realm of internet relay chat, it's pretty anonymous. And there's many different levels that you can go through to even make it more and more anonymous.
To investigate.
As Hays County detectives continued searching for the elusive Kelly McCauley, campus police at Texas A&M University uncovered a lead. Carrie Cuyava's car had been located at an airport near campus. A parking stub indicated it had been left there on April 10th, just a few days after he left for San Antonio to meet Kelly. The car was impounded and taken for a closer forensic evaluation. Detectives processed every square inch of the car, searching for any clue regarding Carrie's murder. In the hatchback, they found dried human blood. Tests later proved that it had come from the murdered student's body. But with no fingerprints found, determining who had been at the wheel would be difficult. The following day, Carrie's roommate contacted investigators.
Just sitting at your desk. Right
Yeah.
there.
He had recalled something he now believed was vitally important. In the days after Carrie had left for San Antonio, He returned to his dorm room and found a young man working at Carrie's computer. The man introduced himself as Kelly McCauley's brother.
Hi.
He said he was retrieving schoolwork for Carrie Kuyava. Unaware that his roommate was in danger, he didn't think anything of it at the time. Police were convinced that Kelly and her brother were somehow involved in Carrie's murder. But tracking these mysterious siblings along traditional routes had been unsuccessful. If police were ever going to solve this case, they had to find a way to track them down in the complex world of cyberspace.
There was nobody that was initially involved in this investigation from any of the agencies that we knew about that had any kind of expertise in the IRC platform or this form of communication or chat rooms or anything along those lines. So it was virgin territory for us.
Things were looking grim until an article about the case in the local paper brought a chat room veteran named Kerry Lee to police. He'd interacted with both the victim and the suspect online. And Kelly McCauley just couldn't stop talking about her blossoming new romance.
And we would hear from her that he was at her house or apartment or wherever, and he was in the kitchen studying, or he was in the couch watching TV, or Carrie and I are going to a movie tonight, and we heard details, again, that we didn't really want to hear. But it was all she wanted to talk about, and this went on and on and on and on and on.
It went on, investigators realized, days after Carrie was already dead. Police were learning a lot about Kelly McCauley, except where to find her or her brother.
I made a copy.
Lee offered to help. He handed over a disc containing a phone number that Kelly McCauley had once given him. Investigators traced the number to a woman in San Antonio. There was no Kelly McCauley living here, she said, only Kenny Lockwood, her 31-year-old son. At present, he was ailing in the hospital. Too sickly to work, Kenny had two loves in his life, his mother said, computers and Texas A&M University.
AOL?
Since being rejected by the college the year before, Lockwood spent at least 12 hours a day chatting on the university's website. With a warrant in hand, investigators searched the home. They noticed a red stain on the carpet under the couch. Tests proved the substance was human blood. Investigators searched Kenny Lockwood's bedroom. In the back of his closet, they found a weapon consistent with the type that had killed Carrie Kuyava. More incriminating, however, was a photograph found on Kenny Lockwood's desk. It was the woman they'd been hunting, a photograph of the person they knew as Kelly McCauley, and it had been torn out of a magazine. It now appeared to investigators that Kelly McCauley was a fictitious creation. Kuyava's dream girl was nothing but a decoy. Investigators confiscated Lockwood's computer, floppy disks, and a number of documents. The only way to prove that he'd lured Carrie to his death was to scour his and Carrie's computers and retrieve all of the conversations that had taken place online between the fictitious Kelly and the unsuspecting Carrie Kuyava. David Burns of the Hays County Sheriff's Office was one of the investigators who scrutinized the files.
We took all of this information and then began pouring through everything that had been talked about on all those computers, that had been talked about in chat rooms, that had been talked about on emails, that had been, any conversations whatsoever that had been done online. We went through and poured over every bit of that information.
The recovered logs and conversations showed that the fictitious Kelly would chat online for hours, especially with Carrie. Lockwood, pulling the strings, encouraged Carrie Cuyava's attraction. Ultimately, he suggested that the two get together in person.
Hey, is Kelly home?
Investigators suspect that when Carrie showed up in San Antonio, Lockwood posed as Kelly's brother. Though no one will ever know what motivated Lockwood, the hole in Carrie Cuyava's skull told investigators what happened next.
At some point in time, things went wrong. Carrie Cuyava was sitting on the couch when he received a .22 caliber bullet wound to the back of the skull, fell forward onto the floor, and was probably deceased before he hit the floor.
Lockwood then placed the body in the trunk of Carrie's car, drove to a rural site, and abandoned his victim. He continued the charade by writing emails from Carrie's computer to the victim's friends and family, assuring them he was alive. And most likely, he deleted a large number of files from Carrie's computer in the hopes that detectives would never catch on to his drawn-out plan.
Here's Mr. Lockwood.
On April 27, 2000, Kenny Lockwood, still recovering in the hospital from an unidentified illness, was arrested for murder. Under questioning, he admitted to the crime.
He did provide us with a partial confession. At one point in time, he actually admitted to the shooting having occurred in his residence. He explained to us the history between he and Carrie, that they admit on, and that he was posing as this Kelly.
But he would never stand trial for his crimes. A few months after his arrest, Kenny Lockwood took his own life.
She's beautiful. You want to take a look at her picture?
Carrie Cuyava was lured into believing that a stranger was a friend. But even an evening with one's own family can turn deadly. Los Angeles, California is home to 9.5 million people, many drawn here by the promises of fame and fortune. But on Mother's Day night, 1995, the upper level of the City Walk parking garage became the backdrop for one family's nightmare. Around 11 p.m., paramedics and deputies from the LA County Sheriff's Department were dispatched to the garage. 30-year-old Paul Carassi and his 2-year-old son had survived an assault by unknown assailants. But Paul's mother, 61-year-old Doris Carassi, and his ex-girlfriend, 29-year-old Sonia Salinas, did not. The two women had been nearly decapitated in a vicious knife attack. As Paul Carassi was taken to the hospital with a severe knife wound to the hand, police began processing the scene. Personal items found near the victims suggested the ambush had been sudden and without warning. Police carefully documented and collected dozens of bloodstains. As investigators continued searching for evidence to help them piece together what had happened, a 911 call came in to police dispatch. There had been another stabbing, less than 5 miles away. As officers from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office continued processing the scene of a brutal double murder, word came in that another stabbing had been reported a few miles away. Lying by the side of the highway, police found 44-year-old Donna Lee. Barely conscious, she said that someone had tried to rob her and steal her car after she pulled off the road. She had been stabbed in the abdomen and was severely bleeding. Despite the life-threatening injury, she somehow managed to fight off her attacker. Donna was rushed to the hospital. Police began searching the area for clues to the assailant's identity. A few feet from where Donna Lee was found, they discovered several items belonging to the victims of the City Walk garage knife attacks. They recovered Sonia Salinas' identification, a fanny pack belonging to Paul Carassi, and his mother's blood-stained purse. Nearby, officers found another clue. A blood-stained knife, possibly the one used in all of the assaults. Someone, it seemed, had gone on a violent rampage that spanned several miles. All of the evidence, including Donna's vehicle, were collected and forwarded to the crime lab for a closer examination. Sergeant Sam Muniz of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was assigned to the case.
How many times did you see that particular knife?
The brutality of the murders that took place at the parking garage was difficult to comprehend.
It was already late.
What motivates somebody to do that? You know, especially the way it's done. Because you look at these two victims and you look at them, they're nearly decapitated. I mean, there's stab wounds from one side to the other and all over the bodies. I mean, this guy was either angry, if he lost it mentally, you know.
A few hours after the assaults, investigators went to Paul Carassi's residence to notify his family that he was recovering in the hospital. Though no one appeared to be home, they noticed something strange. Paul Carassi shared an address with someone named Lee, the same last name as the victim found along the highway.
Called in on the radio, had it checked out.
Believing it had to be more than a coincidence, detectives went to the hospital to interview Carassi. He told investigators that he'd taken his mother, Doris, his ex-girlfriend, Sonia, and their 2-year-old son out for a Mother's Day dinner. As they made their way back to the car, someone suddenly attacked him from behind, forcing him to the ground. He heard screams and tried to fight back. But when he tried to grab the knife from the assailant, his hand was badly cut. He was then knocked unconscious. When he came to, he discovered the bodies of his mother and Sonia. Paul stated that he did in fact know Donna Lee, the victim found on the side of the highway. He worked with her at a local bank, and the two were romantically involved.
You mean the same thing as last night?
They had recently moved in together. In fact, his relationship with Donna had caused friction between him and his ex-girlfriend, Sonia Salinas, who also worked at the bank.
We can do that.
Sonia was seeking sole custody of their 2-year-old son and the garnishment of Paul's wages for child support.
Do you have a preference?
Despite those tensions, Paul couldn't imagine anyone who would want to target him or his family.
We had finished having dinner and...
Convinced that the two assaults were somehow connected, examiners at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Crime Lab hoped an examination of the evidence would point them toward a suspect. They began by analyzing the bloody knife found at the Donna Lee crime scene. Serological tests confirmed that blood from all 4 victims was present on the knife. But no suspect fingerprints were found. Desperate to identify the killer before he struck again, investigators began scouring Donna Lee's car for clues. Though no prints were recovered, in the back seat they found a vital piece of evidence. It was a copy of Donna Lee's divorce papers, ending her 15-year marriage to a man named Frank Lee. For investigators, it was the first hint of a motive and of a possible suspect. Detectives quickly obtained a warrant to search Frank Lee's home. In the kitchen, they discovered knives that were similar to the one used to stab Donna Lee and to slay Doris Carassi and Sonia Salinas. Maintaining his innocence, Frank Lee willingly accompanied investigators to the sheriff's department. A physical examination of the suspect revealed no signs that he'd been in a violent struggle. But he admitted that his divorce had turned ugly, and he was bitter that Donna was leaving him for Paul Carassi. Though the impending divorce made Frank Lee the logical suspect, the motive didn't quite seem to fit the murders. For investigators, Paul Carassi should have been the target of the jealous husband's rage, not his mother and ex-girlfriend. Frank Lee was ultimately cleared as a suspect in the double murder. Believing some clue to the killer's identity had been overlooked, examiners turned back to the physical evidence. Criminalist Beverly Kerr started with the T-shirt worn by Paul Carassi at the time of the attacks.
I pulled out Paul's shirt and I looked at it, and we saw something that might have appeared to be a handprint in blood. We all looked at it, we all conferred, and we started feeling that that's possibly what it could be.
DNA testing showed that most of the blood on the T-shirt, particularly in the handprint area, had come from his ex-girlfriend, Sonia Salinas. But Carassi never mentioned that he touched either of the victims. Police decided to question him again. When asked how the blood got on his shirt, Carassi said he'd forgotten that he checked Sonia's pulse after he regained consciousness. He added that he had slipped and fallen in the pools of blood near Sonia's body. He must have wiped her blood off on his shirt. But with each passing minute, investigators began to suspect that Carassi was hiding something.
He went, muddling through the interview saying, well, this and that. And that's just all of a sudden hit me. He said, this guy has got to be, the person I'm looking for, because he just cannot get his story straight.
The investigation's best witness was suddenly the prime suspect in the brutal Mother's Day massacre. Looking to prove that Paul Carassi had murdered his own mother and his ex-girlfriend, investigators turned once again to the crime lab. Now they hoped that the murdered women's own blood would give them proof that he was behind these unspeakable acts. Detectives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department continued their investigation into a series of vicious knife attacks on Mother's Day that had left 2 women dead and 2 more victims injured. Now they had reason to believe that one of the victims, Paul Carassi, was behind the murders of his mother Doris and his ex-girlfriend Sonia Salinas. To prove it, criminalist Elizabeth Devine began reconstructing the events at the parking garage using Carassi's bloody T-shirt. Though Carassi had previously stated that he slipped in Sonia's blood and then wiped his hands off on his shirt, that explanation didn't jibe with the evidence.
Well, it was clear that a lot more had happened. There was blood spatter, there was contact transfer, which was from Sonia Salinas' neck, which was severely slit. I mean, her head was almost decapitated. Blood soaked all the way through onto his chest. That's not passive transfer of blood. That's not blood on your hands that you wipe on your shirt. That's something bleeding is up against your skin for a period of time.
And examiners determined that the handprint on Carassi's shirt had not come from him. Sonia Salinas had left it. And there was more.
What the blood pattern on the handprint was able to show was that the person that left the handprint was alive, because the person clasped the shirt as opposed to just touching the shirt. It also showed that the person that grabbed the shirt was bleeding, because we had excessive blood around the fingertips. It wasn't like finger painting where you put your hand in paint and then you put your hand on a shirt. We had it extending beyond the margins of the finger, which means that the person that grasped the shirt was bleeding.
When the blood patterns on the shirt were compared to post-mortem diagrams of Sonia's hands, the injuries didn't all line up. Sonia had sustained more wounds after grasping Paul Carassi's shirt.
she grabbed his shirt, and she had not sustained all her wounds. So it was right in the middle of the attack. It was after the wounds started and before the crime ended. And seeing how he said he was on the ground and not involved, along with the spatter and everything else, it showed that not only was he involved, but he was within 3 feet of her, able for her to grasp him.
The analysis locked Karasi into the heat of battle. And further investigation revealed that he had not acted alone. DNA testing proved that blood found on Sonia Salinas' shoe had come from Donna Lee, the woman who survived a knife attack shortly after the murders.
Person Paul's blood.
That meant the injury to Lee's abdomen had happened at the parking garage, not at the side of the highway, as she previously claimed.
And his shirt was right here.
To prove that Donna Lee had lied to cover up her involvement in the double murder, examiners began looking for answers as to how blood from her injury ended up on the victim's shoe.
The only way you could really get the blood to flow down the shoe in that way was if the shoe was in contact with her abdomen for a sustained period of time. And I tried many different scenarios, many different positions, many different theories about how you could do that. And really the only one I could come up with is that she held her feet to her stomach while Paul slit her throat. And that to me put her right in, you know, that's the business end of that crime scene.
This is Donna's.
Investigators concluded that Donna Lee had been accidentally stabbed in the abdomen as she and Paul struggled to overpower the victims.
Yeah, I answered the question.
Paul Karasi was administered a lie detector test. When asked if he killed his mother and ex-girlfriend, he responded, no.
Bad news for you, okay?
Test results indicated that he was lying.
Here to us, blood here, here.
Coupled with the forensic evidence, Karasi was placed under arrest.
You have the right to change your mind at any time.
Donna Lee, still recovering in the hospital from her wounds, was also placed under arrest for the double homicide. Investigators believe that Paul Karasi, with Donna Lee at his side, began plotting the murders of his ex-girlfriend and mother when the financial strain of his impending custody battle became too much to bear.
As it is, Paul Karasi made limited money per week, and he had a lot of outstanding bills. So his problem was basically financial and, you know, taking the kid. So how do I plan to take my kid and get all the money, right? So what he's doing now, he's angry at both, because the mother also backed up Sonia. So he's angry at both of them.
On Mother's Day night, as Paul Karasi and his family made their way to the car after having dinner, Donna Lee was waiting nearby with the murder weapon in hand. Their plan to make the murders appear to be a robbery gone bad backfired when Donna Lee became accidentally injured during the assaults and was forced to seek medical attention while attempting to discard the victim's belongings. A jury found Paul Karasi and Donna Lee guilty of first-degree murder. Paul Karasi was sentenced to death. Donna Lee was sentenced to life in prison. For investigators, when a suspect and victim had an intimate relationship in life, proving murder can be a challenge. When the line between familiarity and contempt becomes blurred, it falls to forensic examiners to find the truth and reveal a killer's deadly intentions.